Today we're going to be making 2 of my baby Einkorn sourdough loaves. They're perfection, and I'm so excited to show you step by step just how I do it, so let's get to it. We're going to be following the recipe on my website. I'm going to give you all the proportions on this video, but if you want everything written out to where you can go back to it and easily see it, it's on my website. I'll link that below. But for now, we are using 520 grams bread flour, 180 grams of einkorn, and 530 grams of filtered water. I like to mix that all up and give it a little knead. You really want everything to incorporate at this stage. This is the autolyse. So basically we're just hydrating the flour and water, and we're gonna let that sit for 30 minutes. In that time, it's gonna smooth out, it's gonna relax, and it's gonna give your starter some extra time to grow, develop, get happy. My starter recipe that I go by actually only gives me 140 grams, which is exactly what we need for this double batch. So I ended up using a little bit of my discard. We're gonna mix that all in just so the sourdough incorporates, then sprinkle over the salt. That's gonna be 14 grams of salt. And I like to do just like a splash of water to help dissolve it. It's gonna all separate and get weird. Just believe in the process, knead it, do stretch and folds, do the ribad method like I was just doing there until you get this nice smooth ball. We're gonna let this rest for 1 hour, and we're gonna do 4 series of stretches and folds. In that time, feed your starter. So to do the stretch and fold, get a wet hand, slide it under, lift the dough up and fold it over. Turn 90 degrees, hand goes under, stretch, plop. You're gonna do that 4 times so that every bit of that dough gets stretched and folded. So like I said, we're repeating it 4 times. In that time, the dough is gonna grow, it's gonna relax. Be careful, you really wanna try not to knock out too much air here because, you know, we want the air, we want it to be nice and fluffy. But after the 4 turns, the 4 stretch and folds, I'm gonna let mine rest for 2 hours. You may need longer, you may need less. You'll get to know your dough as time goes on. So I just sprinkle some flour over a clean work surface, dump all of that dough out, and I like to kind of lift it up, make sure the flour is up under it. And since we're making 2 loaves, I just use a firm bench scraper, separate them, make the blobs like separate so that they're not touching and refuse. And we're gonna pre-shape. So you just saw me do it. We're just kind of like encouraging the dough to be in this round shape. So what you do is take one side, fold it over, take the other side, fold it over, and then I just kind of like roll it on top of itself like a jelly roll, and then use my flexible bench scraper and tighten it out into a ball. You can even see the fermentation on this dough. There's tons of little bubbles. If there's any big bubbles, just go ahead and pop that. We're gonna let those sit for 5 minutes just so that they, you know, kind of get that ball-like shape. And we're gonna prep our banetones. I don't know if I'm saying that right. You can also just use colanders. I've used colanders with like a kitchen towel. It doesn't really matter. Just use what you have, but I do like these banetones. I sprinkle them with flour, and then I sprinkle the tops of the dough with flour. I don't know, I just like to touch the dough, so I smooth it back around and gently flip that up. So all of those kinds of seams are now at the top exposed, and I gently stretch everything back out. You don't want to go too far. This is sort of one of those things where like the more you do it, the more you'll get to know your dough and how much you need to stretch it and whatever. But that's about how much I stretched. And then we're going to repeat that where we do one side folded over, the other side folded over, and then this time we're going to roll it like a jelly roll. So I had a bit like too much flour on the work surface, so it didn't really like stretch against the counter. I don't know if that makes sense, but either way, take the ends, tie them up with your fingers, kind of like pinch them, and then use your bench scraper, flexible or firm bench scraper, and just kind of tighten that all up. So I'm gonna show you what I do, and that's knit the dough. You can leave it here, but I like to take the sides and kind of like overlap them, fold them, twist them, pinch them, and that's just gonna create more tension. And tension is the name of the game, or one of the names of the game, for nice oven spring. I just sprinkle flour back on top, and that one's good. That one's done. And basically, I'm just showing you here how much more tension comes when you use that bench scraper and use the friction of the counter to, you know, tighten it all up. My dough were really fermented already, or so I thought, so I only gave them 30 minutes, but honestly, I've let them rest at this point for like 2 hours before. So here are the doggies. We love a doggy moment. Anyways, if you can't tell, it's the next day. I had this random parchment from making chocolate chip cookies and I didn't want to throw it out or waste it, so I am using it. I like to kind of like use it as almost a kind of like handle to flip it over so that the dough doesn't plop out. I sprinkle the tops of the dough with flour, blend it with my hand, and then brush it off to get the excess off of the dough and the parchment. Then I use a lame at a 45-degree angle. Give it just a big slash. If this is your first time making sourdough, don't try to do anything fancy, just make a slash. We're gonna bake those in preheated Dutch ovens at 450 for 25 minutes with the lids on. So that's gonna trap all that moisture and it's gonna give them a really nice crust and an even bake. It's also going to help with that oven spring. After 25 minutes, remove the lids and then you're going to bake for another like 15 to 25 minutes. It all depends. As you'll be able to see, the cast iron Dutch oven is going to give it a lot more heat and color, so it's going to get that little more burnished color. This stainless steel pot, while it's great and it works, it doesn't conduct heat as well, so it's a little paler. So on that one, I probably should have gone for more like 25 minutes, but it's all up to you how thick you like your crust. The longer you cook it, the thicker that crust is going to be. The shorter you cook it, the thinner it's going to be. We're going to cut this in half with a serrated knife and it's so pretty. Honestly, I probably could have done with a little bit more fermentation, but hey, that's sourdough. All right, see you on the next one.